Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We're going to wait just a few minutes to get started to allow others to join us. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, What is Value Stream Management and Why Do You Need It? My name is Laurel Heenan, and I am delighted to be your moderator for this webinar. Before I introduce you to today's presenter, let me cover a few housekeeping details. This webinar is being recorded, and we will provide you with a link to the recording tomorrow. As you may have noticed, all attendees are on mute to avoid background noise, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We will leave time at the end for questions and answers, but if you have any questions or comments as we go along, please type them in the GoToWebinar control panel in the questions box. I will monitor the questions and get them organized for Q&A at the end, and if it feels right, then I may interrupt our presenter as the time feels right. Our presenter today is Carmen DeArdo. Carmen is the Senior VSM Strategist at Tasktop, helping customers experience project-to-product transformations to accelerate their delivery capabilities. Carmen is a regular speaker at global DevOps events and is finalizing his latest book, Standing on Shoulders, A Leader's Guide to Digital Transformation, which will be released later this year. Previously, as DevOps Technology Director at Nationwide, he was responsible for driving continuous delivery by utilizing DevOps, Lean, and Agile practices. He is also named as one of the 25 must-follow enterprise DevOps leaders by TechBeacon. And with that, I will pass this over to Carmen to begin today's webinar.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So, a little bit about Tasktop, just to begin with. Tasktop is the premier partner or premier company to provide integration, get your tools talking, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through this talk, along with Tasktop's role in value stream management. Also, you know, Tasktop has 43 of the top Fortune 100 companies. As you can see, lots of different tools are supported, and 500,000 API tests run every day. So with that, let's get started. One of the backdrops for this talk is the book that's coming out by Mick Kirsten, the Tasktop CEO, called Project to Product. It's coming out later this fall. We'll be providing more information about this. And it's being published by IT Revolution, which is Gene Kim's company. And really what it talks about, and we'll get into it more, is why it's necessary in this age of software for companies to move from a project-oriented to a product-oriented mindset, and how value stream management and the ability to understand how to flow business value to customers more quickly is key to that. So, you know, the book, again, will be available this fall. So let's just start out with the problem, right? I think a lot of IT leaders, feel like, hey, we've done a lot of great stuff. We've implemented Agile, right? We have new technologies, right? We're using cloud technologies, Kubernetes, Docker, automated testing. We may have certified processes, which is maybe important, especially in an ITSM space. So it feels like we're doing a lot of great things. However, is the business really happy about this, right? And I'm not saying that there haven't been improvements, and that I'm sure, from my experience at Nationwide and other companies, we certainly were making improvements in helping the business along. But there still seemed to be kind of this disconnect between what we were doing from an IT perspective and how the business was seeing us. And I think one of the issues there was, from a business perspective, we weren't really increasing the flow of business value across the entire value stream. Most companies, yes, Microsoft is there when you need them. Most companies will say that, they started with Agile, right? So Agile is a good place to start. And CI/CD is a good place to start. But what you find is that that's not going to be sufficient. That's going to be a point of diminishing returns. And so DevOps kind of brings in what I call code to cloud. So there's a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of help. There's a lot of technologies that you can throw at code to cloud. But that's still not the entire story, right? Because, you still have this whole part of your value stream on the left-hand side, which is from idea, an idea and a hypothesis, as Mark Schwartz would say, from some of his work like The Art of Business Value, and a story actually getting in the backlog of your Agile team. And that's where you must connect to the business. So unless you can connect all the way from business idea through deployment, it's really impossible to increase flow across the entire value stream. So Forrester recently came out with this study which said that the time now is right for value stream management. And as you can see, Tasktop was cited as one of the leading companies, especially as far as vision goes, in this space. So what is value stream management? How did Forrester define this? And what Forrester said was that with value stream management, organizations implementing Agile plus DevOps will better understand the value they deliver, the efficiencies they gain, and the further optimization possibilities for each product in their delivery pipeline. So I think there's a couple key segments there, right? Not only is it helping you understand what you've gained, but it allows you to identify your further optimization, which means what is your bottlenecks. I worked for Tom Pater at Nationwide, who wrote a book around the Lean IT field guide with Mike Orzen. He would ask me the question, Carmen, why do we want things to flow? And half kiddingly, to see if I was awake. And I would answer, the answer would be, well, because we want to see where they slow down or stop. And so if you can't see where things are flowing, you really don't understand where your bottlenecks are. And it's really been hard and impossible for organizations, especially Fortune 100 organizations, to actually see that flow of work across the entire value stream for a given product, from idea through deployment and feedback. So, that really gets to the true north that we should have as an IT organization, which is enabling business responsiveness and really reducing the lead time, not just from code commit to deploy, but from business idea hypothesis to delivery and feedback. Because we know that will drive not only business success, but also higher engagement, right? If you look at the State of the DevOps report, if you look at other things, we know that the engagement of our teams is critical to having higher productivity and success, and also driving innovation. So it's important for organizations to have a true north and to have that true north be on speed, because in the past, that has not typically been how IT has done business. And we'll talk about this a little more, but a lot of times IT has been been viewed as a cost center. How can we reduce costs? Or IT was around efficiency, but it was never really designed. We didn't really architect our systems, architect our pipeline, provide metrics to actually show how we can get faster from idea to deployment and feedback. And that kind of leads into what we consider these 5 problem areas, right? And they really are all around this disconnect between IT from the business and the vision. And that manifests itself in various ways, right? Many times we're tracking activities, not results. You know, recently Jeff Bezos wrote an article which he talked about how there's these things called proxy metrics that we track. And proxy metrics are not really things that lead directly or sometimes even indirectly to business results. There's things like, well, we've implemented Agile, or we've trained people on Agile, or we've done certain things, but those things are activities. They're not really demonstrably showing how we're producing business results. It sort of leads into point 4, which it's sort of like, well, that's great. IT is over there solving their own problems. They're playing with this technology that's driving our costs up. How's that helping me? Right? So you start to get this sense that IT is a cost as opposed to a profit center. And one of the things that Mick talks a lot about in the book, which is based on some of the work by Carlota Perez, which is a fascinating study, is that, you know, the companies, the FANGs, the Facebook, the Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, they don't view IT as a cost. They view IT as a strategic advantage. Again, the State of the DevOps report talked about companies that are investing in DevOps capabilities are actually, if you look at their financials, are doing better in the market. So if a company is continuing to just focus on the cost aspect of IT, that's a problem, right? And that's a problem for that company. It's a problem for IT and the business together. And then a lot of this is around this whole idea of project funding. And that's really where we're going to take a deeper dive, because project and project management is really an era of management from 1 or 2 eras ago, when we were building things like dams and bridges, things that were repeatable processes that we understood, where there was no surprise, right, as someone like George Gilder would say, into how the work was going to be done. Our work is more creative. Our work has surprises. To use a project funding model, you know, is an issue with that. Furthermore, projects by their essence are temporal things. Projects have a beginning, they have an end. It's really products that drive how successful a business is going to be. Products continue through their own life cycle. And so this whole aspect of doing work through projects and how we fund it and how we staff it is fundamentally broken, and is leading to, I believe, one of the key causes to this gap and this different perspective we have between business and IT. So let's get a little deeper into this. There's 7 areas that we're going to talk about as far as this project versus product orientation, and how it's different and how it impacts the results, and how even our language with the business is different. So let's talk about budgeting. You know, most large companies have this annual budget process. You know, we're now into October, which means I would guess most of you, if I was going to do a poll question now, would be interesting. I'm not. Probably have already locked in your budgets for 2019. So we're living in this world that's supposed to be agile, and we're supposed to be responsive, yet we have budgets and plans that we already have sometimes mapped out through the next 12, 14, 18 months. I mean, that's a fundamental problem, right? When you start a new project, you end up with this budget, and so, you know, you do your scoping around it, you do your management around that budget. That's, again, a temporal activity. If you're focused on products, you're continually funding that product based on how you believe strategic it is to your portfolio, where you feel you need to inject new budget, you know, what's going on with that product. You're living with that product. Your team's living with that product. This is not a one and done thing that you're going to throw over the wall and walk to your next project on. So budgeting is one element of that. that drives the wrong kind of behaviors in terms of this perspective between business and IT. Timeframes. Again, projects, they might be a year, they might be 6 months, they might be a year and a half, whatever they are, there's a start and an end and a maintenance. And again, that's not really how, the FANGs or even, we do a lot of work with BMW thinks about it, right? If they're producing a new car like the i8, it's a product. They're living with that product. That product's going to have, several years, maybe decades in some of these cars of work. You're going to continually go through this product life cycle of new ideas. How do I go through that plan, do, check, release, improve process? So again, it's a fundamental disconnect with producing a product versus I'm going to do this one-time project activity. Again, I touched on this a little bit already, is success, right? If you look at projects, a lot of times it's based on costs. The incentives for project managers are based on costs, right? Did you get this scope done within this time frame for this cost? Many times when the project is over, you don't even know if it's been successful because you've just started to deploy it. It takes sometimes products months to get feedback and understand how to tweak it and improve it and make it better. So just at the time you really should be doubling down and understanding and getting that feedback and working on it, that project's finished, maybe it was a success. What was the basis of success? Was it actually, it did what it was supposed to do? Did it improve business value? Did it improve sales? What did it do to be successful other than it met a date with a set of scope and a certain cost, and now we're done? So again, this model doesn't lend itself to an ongoing continuous improvement, product focused business value concept. Teams. I mean, when I worked at Bell Labs many decades ago, we had a product-oriented model around things like the switches and network control points and things that we were implementing for things like 800 service and calling card service and things that are now antiquated and that millennials may not even have ever heard of. But certainly, we had a model though where work was brought to the team. If you think about the dynamics of a team, you go through the whole, forming, storming, norming, performing life cycle. And just when you get that team together and being a high performance team, you don't want to blow them up and then start another project. Yet that's what we do many times. We take people, we bring them from various systems to a project, right? And then that project finishes and then they're dispersed back. Furthermore, the way we allocate people sometimes is somewhat mind-boggling, right? I mean, you might say, well, I need one person from that team or area, 2 people, a quarter person, a half a person, an eighth of a person. I mean, there are no such things, obviously, as quarter and eighths of people, right? So that fragmenting people and fragmenting the work, we know that is not a way to be productive. That increases their WIP, their work in progress. We know from the Phoenix project that is not a way to be productive. It doesn't provide you the focus you need. And so, those kinds of structures around projects, again, don't lend themselves to having an engaged team, a high-performing team, an empowered team who are living with that product, who are invested in that product, and are going to work to try to continue to make that product better. We had cases in the past where at the end of a week, a developer might have to have 12, 6, 12, 8 project codes show up on their time card to try to allocate 40 hours to. I mean, that was kind of insane, and everybody knew it was insane, yet we kept doing it because, we were kind of following this project mindset and this cost mindset. Prioritization. Again, you tend to do things in a project way as a waterfall. Now, that's not to say you can't have an agile project, but even in areas that have implemented Agile, which you typically have gotten is this water scrum fall kind of concept, where you're not really agile all the way through? Are you constantly prioritizing things the way you would in a product sense? Probably not, right? You're coming up with a catalog of things that you're prioritizing, and then you're moving through kind of a waterfall orientation. And again, it doesn't lend to a continuous mindset, continuous prioritization, a continuous conversation with the business about what's most important now, what's most important for the next sprint, the next release. The visibility of the work. I used to be able to, I would walk the halls, at some previous roles I had, and if you walked up to an agile team, the work was very visible, right? So they were using an agile management tool, maybe a Jira, an RTC, a Rally, a Trello, whatever, maybe all of them. They would have a board, a physical board, right? And so you could see they had a backlog, in progress, done. You could see the work, but that backlog, where did it come from? I used to joke, like, is this manna from heaven? I mean, where did this come from? Well, in essence, it was connected to a portfolio, but you couldn't see that. That work wasn't visible. All the work that was closest to the customer was what we called Microsoft, limbo, right? It was in spreadsheets. It was in Word documents, right? It was discussed during endless meetings. The work was not visible, was not accounted for. It was hard to have conversations with the business about it. And it was certainly hard to know where your bottlenecks were if they were left of the backlog of the agile team. And in the same way, to the right, once you were through a series of iterations or sprints, you weren't deploying immediately in general. And again, the work kind of disappeared. So you did not have this visibility. And that lends to this view that IT is a black box, right? So we have, what I used to say is we were still in the newspaper business. We were producing these newspapers, these reams of reports for project status meetings that were out of date as soon as they were printed or published in a humongous deck. And there were different views of the work. Project manager had an office view, a Gantt chart, right? A Scrum master had their visual management system. A release manager might have another view of the work. There's only one way this work is progressing through the system, and nobody really had a view of it from idea through deployment. And I think one of the key items here is risk. And I think we all realize, because we've all certainly got letters and emails about how our personal data has been compromised, how important risk is to the well-being of a company and the products that they produce. And yet many times in a project model, right, what is the focus of the project? What is the project manager getting paid to produce? It's generally features. Things like defects or debt or risk are not something that necessarily are welcome to be paid for by this project, because they're viewed to be outside of the scope of this specific project. So if there's a vulnerability in a struts library that's impacting some of the software that this project may be involved with, does this project manager want to pay for it? Should another project manager pay for it? Nobody wants to pay for it, right? Nobody wants to prioritize it. Nobody wants to put bandwidth on it. So you have the risk managers fighting with the project managers, right, or the quality managers, because nobody really holistically is managing all the work that in some way, shape, or form relates to business value for what should be a product, right? Features may sell more products, but certainly risk and defects are going to retain customers. I know I've had products where once my personal information, was uncovered, I was not a fan of using that product anymore. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And then debt is really important, because what debt allows you to do is make the next things go faster. And again, the project focus is typically not on investing in making the next thing go faster. And so we're fundamentally at odds with how we should be looking at this product and caring for it and improving it, when we use a project model. So I can't give a talk without Deming, if anybody is familiar with me, and John Willis, who's a great speaker, is, I would say, is probably in the same category. You know, Deming said every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So, you know, that's kind of a two-edged sword there, because we're getting results, but we actually probably didn't architect our system consciously to try to get these results. And one of those elements is architecting your value stream for speed. We don't really have people who have a role to say it's your job to look at the value stream associated with this product and figure out how we can get faster. That's not a concept that we've had in the industry typically. And so it should be no surprise that some of the things we've talked about haven't happened, because we really haven't said, how can we make business value flow more quickly across this value stream? If we don't architect it, then if it happens, it's not going to be because of our conscious effort. So that's a key element and a key way of thinking about this that I believe has to be introduced if we're actually going to succeed in that true north of improving business responsiveness. So what are some of the principles with value stream architecture? Well, the first one is architect for flow and speed. So when we talked about this recently, I was talking to some CTOs about this, and things like APIs came up, and they said, well, one of them said, well, APIs is sort of like good hygiene. It's sort of like brushing your teeth. Everybody should do it. But when you actually think about it, right, if you have a legacy system, and a legacy system aren't just mainframes, right? They can be Java systems. They could be any system you have once you've deployed it as a legacy system, right? You have lots of code, right? Potentially millions of lines of code. And so you're not just going to go in and say, well, we're just going to create APIs and microservices. If you don't understand what really is a key element of that system, a key service that's being consumed by product value streams, you don't really know how to prioritize creating an API or a microservice, because you don't really know what is the work I'm doing, what's its impact on other teams or other products that are important to our company. If I knew that, and I knew that I was the bottleneck, then that would direct me to creating microservices and APIs in those areas. So how do you architect for that? You know, on the other side, right, if you look in the DevOps handbook, you know, there's things like feature toggles and dark launching. So a lot of that speed of delivery comes up to, do you really understand your dependencies? Do you understand what's slowing you down? And then what is a countermeasure to that, with a focus on speed? So if we want to get faster, that leads us into, well, we need some metrics, right, that tells us how our flow is doing. Now, I know most people are going to say, well, gee, we already have 1 million metrics and KPIs. But the reality is, if you probably don't have any metrics that are end-to-end on flow. I mean, a great example I like to talk about is The Goal, right? The book that the Phoenix project was kind of modeled on. And one of the great stories in The Goal was the use of robotics to make things faster. And it turns out one of their goals was to keep the robots 100% busy. Well, the reality was, if the robots were more than about 35% busy, they flooded the rest of the value stream downstream. They could not keep up with the robots. But yet, because they had a goal that was focused on one metric that was not a flow metric, it was a single KPI on robot utilization, they ended up spending more money, more capital to keep robots busy to produce inventory that essentially could not be consumed downstream. So that's an example of having a KPI that's not aligned with the goal. So the flow metrics are things, and I'm going to go into that in a few slides, that are aligned with that goal of having business value visible and understanding where your bottlenecks are as that flows through your value stream. again, if we want to go faster, then we should take those metrics and ask in retrospectives what's slowing us down, right? The team themselves, as Deming would talk about, are the ones who know best how to go faster. They have great ideas probably of how to go faster, but that's not a question we've typically been asking our teams. We may be asking them how we can get cheaper. We may be asking them how maybe they can get more efficient, but we've generally, I don't think, have been asking them, how could we go faster, right? What's slowing you down? What's your wait states? And we'll talk about that a little more, but a lot of those wait states come about because we have request response with SLAs, right? So when I say that, what am I talking about? Well, I might be talking about things like centralized services like performance or security, or I'm waiting or an infrastructure for an environment. If I can start to replace those things with self-service capabilities, then that's a way I can get faster and my team can be unblocked and go faster across their value stream. And then finally, you have to provide capacity to create those continuous improvements and initiatives, which are prioritized with other work. So, and it has to be made visible, right? We're not doing this in the margin. We're not doing this on the sly. This is important work that needs to be done because, again, we have to continue to invest in getting better. So, in order to do that, you really need to create an integrated delivery pipeline product. Again, I found that sometimes while IT focuses on what we're producing for business, we don't focus on the IT for IT aspect of having an actual delivery pipeline product, right? We have tools, but we don't treat it like an integrated product, even though all our work that's going through this value stream is sitting on top of this pipeline. So how do you do that? What are some of the ways to do that? Well, first of all, you need to consider how to use best of breed tools, right? Your teams want to use, the next best tool that they see that they want to use. This era of using best of suite tools, I believe, is over. So in order to do that, you really need to connect them with standard integration patterns technologies, right? And that's obviously what Tasktop is. One of Tasktop's fortes is don't customize your tools, right? How many tools do you have in your environment right now that are causing you pains because you've customized them? They're hard to upgrade, and it would certainly be hard to replace. You almost need to have an exit strategy when you implement a new tool, because that will help you keep it and use it in the way it was intended, integrate it using common APIs, and not fall into this trap of customization. And then you need to be able to model your workflows so you can actually understand how things are going. What are the artifacts involved in moving from idea through feature stories, all the way through deploy? The same thing with incidents and risks or dead items. Do we really understand our workflow so that we can make it visible? And again, that's something that Tasktop can help you with, is to provide a model which then isn't disrupted when a different tool is implemented. So the more you invest in customizing an individual tool, the more then you're dependent on that tool. And if you want to change that tool, it's going to cause you more pain in getting rid of it or strangling it out of your environment. If you use model-based integration, where you're modeling things like features and stories, and then whether you're using Rally or Jira or whatever, that's what's flowing through your value stream. You can replace those tools and you haven't upset the flow of work through your value stream, and you can eventually strangle that tool out of your environment. So a couple of the keys to actually making this work is the organizational structure that you have. You really need to have somebody as a product owner, not just for your business products, but also for your IT products. And you need to have this aspect of an architect for that value stream. And they have to have control, or at least influence over prioritization and funding. right? Your team needs to be cross-skilled. They need to be empowered as much as possible to do as much of the work as possible. Now, I'm not saying that one, two pizza team is going to support every product value stream in your company. I know that that's a fallacy, right? But the more you can empower a team so that they have less dependencies, the faster they're going to be able to go. And then where you do have dependencies, you can do things like feature flags and dark launches, or I believe a concept that's going to become more and more important, which is inner sourcing, where inner sourcing using the Git pull requests allows teams to make changes in code they don't own that needs to be then improved by the owner of that code base. So I believe inner sourcing is something that's going to become very important. And I think even the way we think about supporting code bases is going to be different as we move forward. Because rather than have dedicated teams on code bases, we're going to have more teams focused on products and using inner sourcing as a way to change more of those code bases. So again, going back to Deming and Gene Kim's first way, we really want to optimize the overall system to increase flow and empower those teams working with the business to do that. So one of the things that's coming out of Mick's book is this concept of a flow framework. And the flow framework really at the top talks about these flow metrics and how they're linked to business results. Because in the end, we need to be able to speak the language of the business. And what the business understands are things like the value. How much value is this product producing? How much is it costing us to produce it? What's the quality of it? And then happiness really is not a reflection of the customers of the product, it's the team themselves. Because we know things like Net Promoter Score reflect the happiness of the team who's working on the product is a good indication of what kind of results they're going to produce. So keeping your pulse on the happiness of the team is very important, not only to the engagement and the quality of the team's lives, but the business results that you get from that team. So I'm going to talk, what are these core flow metrics? So one of the things that you'd like to know, right, when you're talking to the business is, well, how much value are customers actually getting, which is flow velocity. Do we spend more time waiting on work than actually doing work? And I think, you'll find if you go up to a team, that's probably true. There's many times they're in wait states, which is their flow efficiency. How long does it take from idea, request to release to actually release, which is flow time? Are my teams thrashing because of too much WIP? Right? We know that work in progress is a leading indicator of flow time. The more work in progress you have, the longer your flow time is going to be. So if you aren't looking at your WIP and you can't see all the work that you're doing across this value stream, you probably aren't able to manage your WIP effectively. And then finally, am I really allocating the right capacity towards features, risks, defects, and debt, which is flow distribution? So I'm going to talk about a few of these in detail a little more. So let's talk again about what flows in a value stream. So there's 4 flow items fundamentally that flow in a value stream. There's features, which are the new business value, and they're pulled by customers. So one thing you're going to notice from this chart is it's a pull model. We know in Lean, we want to implement pull models across our value stream so the customers or people are pulling it through the value stream. So business value, right, is pulled by customers, and there's example artifacts, epics and stories and requirements. Defects, are the things that address quality issues. Risk, right, is something, again, that needs to be given visibility and equal footing, and it's pulled by security and risk officers, right? So, vulnerabilities, regulatory issues, things like that need to be considered when you're looking at how I'm prioritizing work for this product team. And then debt, which can include both technical debt or what I would call process debt, which is where you're coming up with ways to improve, right? It's impediments to future delivery. All these four things need to be invested in a conscious way in order to manage, what we talked about before, these business results: value, cost, quality, and then the internal happiness of the team. So those things flow in the value stream. And so then what kind of metrics or dashboards would we need to understand what's happening for that value stream? So the first one is flow distribution. So this would show you over time what percentage of investment you're making on the resources for this product in features, defects, risks, and debt. And it's not common in different parts of the life cycle or a product life cycle to invest differently, right? You may invest more at features at some point. You may invest more in defects and risks and debt at other points. Different product value streams are going to have different distributions. There is no right or wrong distribution. The idea is by having this distribution, it's visible and it can drive conversations between IT and business, that product owner, the product managers, to determine, are we investing our resources in the right way for this product? I would guess today we really don't have a good idea. We don't have a chart that would show for a given product this kind of distribution. Flow time, right? So flow time is when we start to work on something until the time that it's delivered, right? So lead time is a little bit longer. Lead time starts when it's created, and some things may sit in the backlog before we actually start them. So you want to know what your lead time is, but it's really your flow time that shows how long it takes from the time we decide to do something until we complete it. And that could be a feature, that could be a defect, that could be a risk item, that could be a debt item. And within there, you will have certain cycle times, but then you also have wait times where things are waiting. So the flow time just shows you for each one of those flow items, how long does it take? Is it taking me to deliver these things? Flow efficiency, on the other hand, then brings in this idea of wait time. So we know that there are times when our teams are waiting for work, or work is waiting to get to the next stage, right? Again, it could be waiting for infrastructure. It could be waiting for some centralized service like performance or security test if that's not built into your CI/CD pipeline. Sometimes it's just waiting for a date on the calendar, right? You may be in a situation where we release, the first Friday of every month, or the second, Tuesday of every other month, or whatever it is. You have a window to release. So sometimes what we found is things were just sitting there for days, weeks, waiting for a calendar date. That may open up some executives' eyes to say, is that really how we want to operate, right? Where we have things done and they're just waiting, sometimes 40, 50, 60 days to be deployed, just because we're on a monthly or bi-monthly release cycle. So flow efficiency is what tells you how long you're active divided by your flow time. And we know that for some value streams, just from Lean, doing value stream mapping, these utilizations can be very low, and they could be surprisingly low. And so, they can help you better understand where your bottlenecks are. Because I think up till now, we typically guess what's going to make us faster, right? If I only had more lab environments, if I only had more developers, if we only did more automated testing, well, maybe those are true, and maybe they're not true. And maybe I'm like the robot example in the goal, and I'm just feeding the robot to create more inventory, but I'm really not fixing the bottleneck in my value stream. So that's really what we want to be able to measure, right? How long did it take features to get through? What was the wait time for defects? What was the distribution? These are examples. And so a dashboard like this could provide some of those things. right? It shows velocity, how many things have we produced in the last month, week, whatever the time unit is, my efficiency over time, what is my flow time? So it's 15 days. Is it going up? Is it going down? Again, these are not things to grade the team on. These are the things for the teams to consume to try to help them understand how to get better. And if they've implemented an improvement, they can then look at this and see, well, did it make a difference? Because many times if we implement something that we believe is going to make us faster, well, we should be able to measure it. And without metrics like this, that's impossible to do. Again, flow load is your WIP, how much work do you have in progress, and then distribution shows over time that distribution over the 4 flow items. But then also importantly to the right, you see a link to the business value, the business cost, the quality, and the happiness. And that says business happiness, but it's really the happiness of the team that's doing the work. So I know in my previous role at Nationwide, having information like this would have been invaluable to share with the teams to get a better understanding of how things are going, how things can be improved, and then after making an improvement, what was the result of that? To get these kinds of answers, and also to show the business, well, this is how we're investing. This is where your value is. This is what you're getting. And to open up that black box that exists between IT and business. So again, the goal is to move from a functional organization, which we are in today, right, with projects across these silos, to more of a business value optimization that's business outcome driven. And again, from these functional silos, which have fragmented value streams, to a connected value stream. So, this connected value stream is possible, right? And, Tasktop would love to help you to achieve the goal of connecting your value stream. So how would you start, right? So I get a question a lot of, well, maybe that sounds great, but how do you get started? That sounds like, a lot to bite off, and it's true. So you have to start small. You have to start as an experiment. Pick one product to pilot on. It's small enough that it's manageable enough, right? But it has to be impactful to the business. And it has to be fast moving enough so you can see some results, rather fairly quickly. And risk can be mitigated, especially there's a lot of ways to mitigate risk today, but obviously you want the business to be comfortable with the risk that you may be introducing to this experiment. So again, a couple actions today, right? Get your tools talking, model your artifacts and statuses, model your products, and then get started. And again, as you go up through this journey, right, you're going to do experiments. It's very important to do those show and tells with executives so that they can see not only the results, but the engagement of the team, because now the team is getting more of an opportunity in those retrospectives, in their ideas to experiment and see what might go faster. Their excitement will wear off on the executives. It'll show through to the executives, and you need to celebrate those successes. What I've found is IT many times is not good at telling our own stories and celebrating our successes internally. Now, having said that, it's not going to be a linear journey, right? You're going to need patience to persevere, and you're then going to want to model this to more and more products once you get a few successes under your belt. So we have some education on this at our website, which you can see there. What is value stream management, which is an online training of 2 hours. We also have a consulting service, architecture value streams. These are free services and classes. And then what is the flow framework? If you want to know more about that, the book is coming out by Mick on November 20th. So with that, Laurel, I think I'm turning it back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Carmen. Just a reminder, if you have questions, please type them in the question box and we will get them ready to be answered. We did have a couple questions come in, Carmen, so I'm going to pass these over to you. So the first question we have is, where does an industry that is built around products with long development intervals and waterfall, not software, begin to transition to a value focus?
So that's a good question. You know, two of the people I find kind of fascinating to listen to, and let me think, or some of the defense industries, and I'm going to forget their names under here, but who have talked from Raytheon, you know, companies like Raytheon, who have talked about how they've applied some of these concepts to, you know, things like building tanks or building airplanes. I still think it starts with this model of a product and this model of a value stream, and whether, you know, how much software, although, you know, there are cars today that have 100 million lines of software in them. So it's really secondary to understanding, you know, can you start to apply this? It could be an internal product, right? It may not even be an external a product that's externally you're selling. So do you have anything in your environment that is a product, even if its customer is somebody else, another part of your company, that you can start through these concepts with to apply these concepts? Hopefully that helped.
All right, thank you. And the next question would be, does backlog time impact flow efficiency?
Backlog time does not, because it's not part of the flow time. So that's an interesting, that always was an interesting question, is, well, why are we measuring time in the backlog? Because you're kind of, some people view that as we were being penalized for something that, you know, was not really something that was meant to be worked on. So only flow time is used for flow efficiency, not the time in the backlog. I mean, the real question, I guess the real answer is, you can start the clock wherever you want it to, right? This is not prescriptive in telling you where to start the clock. You can start the clock wherever you want to. It's just there typically is a distinction between the lead time, which is when an idea may have first been come up with, to the time that you've decided to work on it. Now, as it's moving through your value stream, it's going to hit various backlogs, and those times are going to be included. So, you know, you will see those, you could see those as part of your wait states as they're moving through your process and they're being pulled across that value stream. So I guess, you know, it's up to you to determine where to start the clock. But once you start that clock, it will run all the way through the deployment of either that feature, the defect, risk item, or dead item.
All right, thank you.
So the two people I was talking about, just to finish the last one, are, and they have talks on YouTube, Suzette Johnson and Robin Yeaman of Northrop and Lockheed. They talk about the challenge of applying some of these concepts to products they're building, which are not your typical, although they have software, certainly have a lot of software in them, you know, they're not software products, right? Primarily. So if you get an opportunity, Suzette and Robin are also going to speak at our Connect conference in December, but they're great to listen to, and how they're applying some of these things to the work that they're doing.
All right. So the next questions that we have are a little bit more around happiness, actually. And one is, how do you measure business happiness? Would you do that via a survey? And, you know, how would that come into play with from project to product?
Right. So I think I indicated on the one slide, it's really not the happiness of the customer, the business, it's really the happiness of the team who's working on the product. So that's more of an, and I mean, one of the ways that that's measured is your net promoter score, which is simply, would you recommend this as a place to work to your best friend or your friends, right? We know that the happiness of the team working on the product is both kind of a leading and a leading indicator and a lagging indicator, but of how effective they're going to be, because they're engaged, they have higher engagement, they're going to be more productive. So it's not a customer survey, and I apologize, that was probably confusing. It's really doing something like net promoter score for the team that's working on that product to gauge what their happiness is, because we know that is directly going to be correlated to the quality of the work that they're doing.
Great. All right, and so another question we have is regarding that dashboard. Does the dashboard you showed on flow metrics, does a user have to create them?
So we offer a service to create this dashboard. So if you're interested, so again, there's information on tasktop.com on value stream management, where if you're interested in having a dashboard created around the flow framework, that's a service, and we'd be glad to work with you on that.
Awesome. So I think that's all the questions that we have time for today. If you have any more questions, you can contact us at tasktop.com. And just to kind of wrap up, as Carmen mentioned, Tasktop is having our second annual conference this December in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, December 6th. We have a lot of great speakers present. As Carmen mentioned, we'll have Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman in attendance. If you are interested in attending or learning more about the event, you can check that out at connect.tasktop.com. It will be covering a lot more about the flow framework, moving from project to product, and all of Tasktop's value stream management initiatives. Just a reminder that this has been recorded, and we will send out a recording within the next day or so. Thank you, Carmen, again, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Laurel, and thanks, everybody. And again, if you have any questions or want to reach out to me, I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'd be glad to talk more about this. Thank you very much.
Take care.